Hey y'all, welcome back to Whiteboard Wednesdays. We are going to jump right into it. Today, we are going to be talking about facts versus feelings and how this can show up in everyday life. I thought it was important to bring this topic up because I have seen it in my clients in the real world all over social media, how we often interpret facts for feelings or even feelings for facts. I think we often see the latter, but the former can happen in terms of intellectualizing. And so today we are going to be breaking down the difference between facts and feelings so we can all be clear and not confuse them anymore, because there is a difference. And then we're going to be talking about how to integrate the two because both are important in a human's everyday experiences. Facts exist, but that does not negate our feelings. So, how do we incorporate the two to get the best result? That is a question that we'll be talking about a little bit later. So, let's jump right in. A fact is something that is objective reality. So it is things that facts are things that we observe, they things that we measure or we prove. So the sum of 2 plus 2 is always 4. That is a fact. A feeling, however, is our emotional interpretation of experiences. And I want to say our personal emotional interpretation of experiences because we all experience and interpret emotions differently. And so that will be unique to the individual. So a feeling could be math is boring. I don't feel like that. I actually thoroughly enjoyed math. However, some people might feel math is boring. There are also people that feel like math is exciting. Math is their subject. And there are also people that feel like math is hard. All of those feelings are valid. All of those feelings can exist. But the fact of the matter will always be the sum of 2 plus 2 is 4. And so this all kind of sums up that feelings are real, but they're not always rooted in truth. I will get into a little bit more of how, feelings can exist, but they might not be always rooted in truth. And so I want to address, oftentimes we hear that, men typically are more logical, fact based, and women are more feeling based, emotional. And while I do agree that women and men's brains are wired differently, I don't agree with the gender bias that men are just objective, always factual, and women are just always emotional. I think, regardless of gender, we can lie on different ends of the spectrum. We can be emotional, we can be logical. I think we can be both. I think the difference is we often see men act more logically and we often see women act more emotionally. And I think the difference becomes how are we acting? So that doesn't negate that men actually do have feelings. I know a lot of women are like, oh, men don't feel. That's not true. Men have feelings. Men will interpret their experiences. They just don't often act based on those interpretations, whereas women will. And so I think it's a spectrum. I think we can lie anywhere. The goal is to lie within the middle to incorporate facts and feelings. And so that's what we will talk about here with our wise mind. So, as you can see, like I said, we have a wise mind, and this comes from dialectical behavioral therapy or DBT. And so, this concept states that we have 3 states of mind. We have our wise mind, we have our reasonable words, we have our reasonable mind, and we have our emotional mind. And everyone possesses each of these states, but most people, like I said, gravitate towards a specific one most of the time. So, like I said, that's typically the emotional mind or the reasonable mind. Oftentimes, we have to work to figure out what a wise mind looks like. If we have been acting solely based on emotion or solely based on logic and reason, it might be really, really hard to learn how to tap into that other state of mind in order to incorporate it into a wise mind where we are able to make balanced and reasonable and emotional decisions. So, like I said, our emotional mind is used when feelings control a person's thoughts and behaviors. They might act impulsively with little regard to consequences. So, this might often sound like, I want, I want, I want. It could be, I am hungry. What an emotional response to that could be, I want pizza, or I want a salad, or I want a burger. That's based on how you were feeling. So, you might be I need some meat today, or maybe I need to eat healthier today. That would be an emotional mind response. A reasonable mind would look like a person approaching a situation intellectually. So they make a plan and decisions based on fact. So that would look like the sky is blue. My sky is very much blue today. Is y'all's? But that would be a reasonable mind. That's a fact. The sky is blue. Um, it's sunny outside. That's a reasonable reaction response. A wise mind, however, would be the balance between, like I said, the reasonable and the emotional halves. They are able to recognize and respect their feelings while also responding to them in a rational manner. And so we will look like we will look at what some wise mind responses may look like in these examples. I wanted to provide these examples because I often use these with clients in session. Some of these, I've used the first one for sure, because I think we can often, like I said, for those who tend to lie on either end of the spectrum, whether they are more reasonable or more emotional, I think it can be beneficial to break down a situation sometimes and identify the facts, identify the feelings, identify the emotional responses that might come, but also identify what are some other explanations that could be going on. Because if we are a feeling kind of person and we are always interpreting, our interpretation again might be a very personalized, emotion driven one, but what else could be going on? Because the other person on the other end might not interpret the situation the way that you're interpreting. And so now there's miscommunication and a disconnect. So I'll give the first example. You text your friend, you text your partner, and they don't text you back. That is the situation. The fact of the matter is they didn't text you back. An emotional response would be, I said something wrong, or they don't want to talk to me, or they're talking to someone else. These emotional responses are rooted in maybe feelings of insecurity, maybe feelings of guilt, maybe feelings of abandonment, maybe feelings of anger, frustration, sadness. Those feelings can be fueling these emotional responses. So I feel, abandoned based on the fact that they didn't text me back. And so my emotional interpretation of the situation is they are talking to someone else. They don't want to talk to me. Is it right? Who knows? The difficulty I think that we have is putting in space for alternative possible explanations. So okay, fine. They could be talking to someone else, but what else could be happening? Because all we know is that they didn't text you back. Your feelings interpreted it a specific way, maybe based on past experiences, maybe based on the fact that this is like a sensitive thing for you, whatever it may be. An alternative decision or an alternative explanation that for why they didn't text you back might be their phone died. Maybe they didn't see your message. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they didn't press send. I know I have done all of those things. And that might be a reason why I don't text back. It's not necessarily all ill will. And so a wise mind response will take in all of these facts and these feelings and ultimately make a decision based on a balance of the two. So this may look like they didn't reply, acknowledging the facts. I feel anxious, acknowledging your feelings, but I'll give them some space and time instead of assuming and spiraling. I really like the word assuming here because I do think a lot of our emotional responses can be rooted in cognitive distortions. A cognitive distortion is simply an irrational way of thinking. And so that can be like black and white thinking. I didn't get an A, so I must be a failure. That is very much black and white thinking. I didn't get an A. Maybe I struggled on that test. There are other explanations as to why you did not get an A, not just you're a failure. It can be emotional reasoning. So justifying or, operating based on your emotions and making decisions based on your emotions. This can be jumping to conclusions and making assumptions. You see here, like we're assuming that they're talking to someone maybe based on our personal interpretation of what happened. But we have personalization. We're taking things personally. We're internalizing the situation. And so that might come off from, I said something wrong. I feel like these cognitive distortions can influence and impact our emotional responses, and ultimately maybe put us in a position where we aren't looking at the story as a whole. And so sometimes we need to create the space to challenge those cognitive distortions with these alternative explanations, because just as much as they might be talking to someone else, it's also they also might not, have seen your messages, and both of those things can be true. We just can't assume and place one interpretation over the other, and I think that's where the problem often comes in. We are lacking now as a society is we feel like our wants should dictate what happens, and that's not necessarily true. Just because you don't want to do something doesn't mean you don't have to do it. We don't want to do a lot of things. We probably don't want to go to school, you know what I'm saying? You probably don't want to get up at 5 o'clock to go to your job. You probably don't want to get up and go to the gym. But in order to live a healthy lifestyle, to maintain and reduce you developing maybe unhealthy habits, you do go to the gym. Maybe you gonna get charged, your parents are gonna get charged for truancy, and you might get in trouble if you don't go to school. So there are things that we don't want to do, and yet we still have to do them anyways. And so I think, this concept of emotional regulation and emotional control has been coming up because I feel like as a society, we are starting to lack that. Everything is emotional, 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 and we are taking our emotions and making those facts. We are taking those emotions and acting, not looking at any other alternative, not taking into consideration the consequences, which I said was something that oftentimes people who operate under an emotional mindset don't do. They don't necessarily consider the consequences. And so I think we have to be better as a society in teaching our children, our toddlers, our teenagers, and even our grown adults how to emotionally regulate. Just because something happens doesn't mean our interpretation of the situation is the truth and the only truth of the matter. People are allowed to see the world differently. People are allowed to disagree and not think of things in the same manner as you. That doesn't make you wrong and them right, or them right and you wrong, or vice, whatever it may be. Two things can be true. You guys can agree to disagree, and move forward. But we have to do better at managing and regulating our emotions and taking facts and feelings into consideration. We cannot just operate off of feelings, y'all. Our feelings are not enough to justify why we do what we do. There is logic that exists. There is reason that exists, and we must be able to balance it. So if this is something that you feel like you might need to work on, maybe you are more emotional and you want to learn how to regulate your emotions better and be less reactive. Or maybe you are a very logical person and it's very, very hard for you to tap into your feelings and understand how you feel about certain things. And you want to, work on that in order to have a holistic approach and be able to face life and face life's decisions, operating under a wise mind, taking both your feelings and the facts of the situation into consideration. I know that was a lot again, y'all, but these, like I said, these are conversations that need to be had and they apply to us all. I want to offer a reminder that feelings are messengers, not dictators. Your feelings should not be the sole thing that you are using to make your decisions in life. Facts are grounding, but they don't always show the full picture. And so this emphasizes that you can't just have one or the other. You need both in order to make the best decision. You shouldn't use your emotions to dictate everything, and you shouldn't just use facts to ignore emotions, because people will have interpretations, personal interpretations over things, and they shouldn't be ignored, negated, dismissed, whatever it may be. So I hope that was very, very informative for y'all. I will see y'all next time on Whiteboard Wednesdays.